Hello friends, today let us discuss on ablaut and umlaut. Another word for ablaut is vowel gradation. It's a term used by Jacob Grimm and it literally means off sound. It's a vowel change which goes back to the earliest times in the history of Indo-European languages. It's not particular to Anglo-Saxon alone, but can be seen also in Latin. Vowel gradation or ablaut is the name given to that process seen most clearly in the principal parts of verbs by which vowel sounds undergo a change according to whether they occur in a stressed or in unstressed syllable. It can be noted that the position of the stress makes a difference to the vowel that is pronounced in can. I'll give you the example. Can he do it? If you ask that question, depending on the stress position, you know, uh, the pronunciation of can is found changing. If the stress is on can, then you can ask, can he do it? Can he do it? On the other hand, if the stress falls on the pronoun he, then the word can, the pronunciation is shrunk. Can he do it? Can he do it? So can becomes can. And again, if the stress moves to another, that is the verb, do, then again, it gets shrunk. Can you do it? Can you do it? So depending on the place of the stress we mark, there is a vowel gradation or there is a change within the auxiliary can. So this is what is explained by ablaut. Ablaut can be of two types. One is quantitative one and the other is qualitative one. Quantitative one means, through this process, if a vowel is completely changed into another vowel, it is quantitative. Or in qualitative, what happens is, it doesn't change, only if the quality differs. For example, a long vowel is shortened into a short vowel. So that is qualitative ablaut. And this can lead to, this ablaut or this vowel gradation can lead to a modification in the root syllable. Hence, it happened that in many Anglo-Saxon verbs, the present tense, the past tense, and the past participle show a change or a grading in the vowel of the root syllable. For example, in Old English we have the verb drifan, and the past one is draf, and its past participle is driffen. It is important because in modern English, we have certain verbs for which we have irregular, the irregular forms. Usually, in modern English, we form the past tense by adding ed. Past participle also either ed or en. Whereas there are some verbs, for example, drive. Past tense is drove. It is not drived. And the past participle is driven and not drive or driven. So what happens is drive, drove, driven, we say. This comes from this Old English term, drifan. So according to the change in the place of the stress, how the word or is modified. So this leads to the modification of the root syllable. Best example is drifan, drifan, draf, driffen, from which we have the modern English term drive, drove, and driven. Along with the ablaut, we have to talk also on umlaut. It's also a German term. It means sound alteration. It is also called a front mutation or a palatal mutation or a IJ mutation. What happens here is, sometimes in certain words, it happens. The fronting of fronting of back vowels and diphthongs. If there is an element of, which is back vowel in diphthong, it gets fronted because of the influence of an I or J in the next syllable. So this process is very important and decisive because it explains many of the irregular plurals and the mutated the origin of many expressions in modern English. We will come to the the examples. So what happens is uh, there is mutation or there is change in short vowels as well as in long vowels. I will give you the text, therefore you will understand it with the text. A becoming or it became A. A becoming A. That means by reading the text you will understand the changes that are given. So the manifestation of many examples are also given there, which you can see on the text. The manifestation of I mutation is seen in modern English in the formation of irregular plurals. For example, the plural of man. It's not a man's, it becomes men. And also, goose. Plural is not gooses, it is geese. Why this happens? It's because of this IJ mutation. And also, abstract nouns are formed from adjectives. For example, you have a word, hail or hale in Old English. And along with this, by adding another term that is idu, they form nouns. So along with adjective by adding idu, you will get a halidu, which finally turned out to become health. So halidu, which became health in modern English. And similarly, you have longer. Longer plus idu became longidu, and in due course, or in the course of time, it became longidu became length. What happens there is the presence of I, idu, I, that influences the vowel in the word o, and that is shifted or that is muted, that is forced to become o, turned out to become a. Longidu became length because of the presence of I or J in the next syllable. So this process is what they mean by IJ mutation or umlaut. Also, we have verbs from nouns. For example, food. It comes. We have the verb feed. It comes from the noun food. Then verbs from adjectives like full. Full plus jan became full yarn. It became fill yarn, and finally it became filan, from which we have the modern English fill. Similarly, food, along with the ford plus jan, that became fodian, fedian, and finally it became feed. Another one is mutated plurals. In Germanic and in Anglo-Saxon, the usual way of forming the plural was by adding the suffix iz. So when iz is added to a word, the root syllable, the vowel gets changed, gets transformed because of the influence of this I in iz. For example, moose was a word in Old English. Moose, and its plural, it becomes moose plus iz. It doesn't become mooses because of this umlaut or ij mutation. That o sound, it gets transformed and it becomes mice. That is why we have mouse and the plural is mice. We have examples like that. Man in Old English plus iz, that doesn't become manis. It became menis, and finally it became men. Similarly, gauze plus iz, that becomes gauzes, and finally it becomes gaze and geese. Similarly, with the tooth and the teeth, this is what happened with the tooth, and the plural is not a tooth; it becomes teeth. Then we have abstract nouns from adjectives. I have already explained that hal plus idu, how it becomes health. Then mutated verbs from nouns. Once again, I am telling that extra example. Fod jan becomes a fed jan, and finally it becomes fedian, and it becomes feed. Then mutated verbs derived from adjectives. Example was a full jan. It becomes a fill yan, and finally it became fill. Finally, mutated comparative and superlative degrees. We have an expression, elder and eldest, and how does it come? It is because of this umlaut. The old English terms, for forming comparative was ira, ira, that is a suffix. and for forming superlative, it was by adding yeah, ist. So what happens is Eyaldira, Eyald plus ira, that became Eyaldira, and it later became elder because of umlaut, and finally we have the word elder in modern English. Eyaldira, in that word I influences the preceding vowel, and Eya became Ye. So we have Eyaldira, and from where we have elder. Similarly, ealdest, because of I mutation, ealdest became eldest, and finally it became eldest. Today, in modern English, we use this elder and eldest only for, sibling relations, blood relations. He's my elder brother. She's my elder sister. That's the way we say. Whereas we have another adjective that is old, older, and oldest, which is more universal, which can be applied not only to persons but also to other stuff, things and buildings and all. The older and oldest actually that had been coined later, and the former forms are now used. That means elder and eldest. They are used only in a restricted sense for sibling relations, for blood relations in the family, and so on. So that's all about Ablaut and Umlaut. We shall come back again with yet another topic in the uh, following class. Thank you very much.